As the world's leading brand experience company, Freeman helps their clients design, plan, and deliver immersive experiences. Their experience design practice is equal parts strategy and creative execution. So last summer, Freeman acquired BaAM Productions, where I have worked for the last 17 years. And as soon as I learned of the acquisition, I immediately started researching Freeman, thinking, as many of you may be right now, that it was a trade show exhibit company. And not only did I learn that I was misinformed, I also discovered an old friend, someone I've known for a long time, and who had recently joined Freeman as SVP Creative. So Peter McGrath spent 25 years at Walt Disney Imagineering with a stint working on Legoland Windsor, tucked in there in the mid-90s, which is where David Wilrich and I, and some others in the room, might have met Peter. Fast forward to 2009, when Peter, now working at WDI, was elected to the TEA International Board, and we got to work together again. Then I realized that Bruce Mao was Freeman's chief design officer. If any of you know of Bruce and his massive change network, this is, well, pretty massive. So when Bruce came to BaAM's offices last fall and spoke to our leadership group about design thinking and new approaches to Freeman's business, the idea gelled for me. I had to share this new network of colleagues with all of you. So Peter and Bruce will be joined up here by Haluk Kulin, who is Freeman's SVP Strategy and Data, who will help you understand why data is more important than ever in the creative environment, and Annemarie Rowe, president of BaAM, who is the best production leader and guru that I have ever worked with. This presentation and the conversation that ensues is intended to connect the dots between the world of experiential marketing and themed entertainment. And I know that some of you are already doing this, but the lines continue to blur, and this actually represents a huge opportunity for members of the themed entertainment industry, and I know that Peter's going to talk more about that. So please join me in welcoming Peter, Bruce, Haluk, and Annemarie.
Thank you, Christine. Good morning, everybody. Just take our seats here. Wow, this is fantastic. It's great to be back amongst the themed entertainment community. Thank you, Christine. Some of you I know in the room, and some of you maybe not, but it has been my pleasure to spend the majority of my career in the themed entertainment space, but most recently moving over to the live brand experience space through exhibits, exhibitions, trade shows, and corporate events. And what was really fascinating to me after spending about a year and a half or so amongst this community was to see the similarities that existed between our two spaces, our two industries. The disciplines that we talk about are very similar, and the ultimate quest is that quest for storytelling and bringing those stories to life, whether they're brands, in our cases. And the shift that's taking place in marketing really brings the opportunity to bringing these worlds and brands to life. And that's the industry we want to talk with you about today. Where's the clicker? There we go. Thank you. So without any further ado, what I'd love to do is introduce you to our team and take you through a little portal into our world to share those experiences with you. And with that, I'd like to ask Bruce to take us through his philosophies around design thinking. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. If you think about design as simply the methodology of producing specific outcomes, in other words, our capacity to envision a future and systematically execute that vision, you realize that design is actually a leadership methodology. It's a way of thinking about the future and realizing the future we want to live in. And that's what we're really doing with Freeman. We're thinking about the enterprise as a design project, So my responsibility as Chief Design Officer is really to think about how do we bring the people together, the right people, the right possibilities, the opportunities, articulate the potential, develop the methodology for executing those, the visions that we create, and really design the whole enterprise as a sustainable practice. And that's really what we've been working on at Freeman. I want to go into a little bit of sort of how we've been thinking about the opportunity, because over the years I've really started as a graphic designer, started in communication, and over a 30-year period or so, developed a methodology designing cities and carpets and social movements and institutions and museums, a really kind of super diverse practice. And when I got involved with Freeman, I thought, what an extraordinary opportunity to think about experience in new ways. And one of the first things that I was asked to do was to just simply visit a few shows. We produce about 15,000 events a year. They asked me to go to some of the shows. And when I went to the shows, I was really struck by how it seemed like they were the same shows that they were 25 or 30 years ago. You could imagine them happening, in the 80s. And they hadn't, it seemed to me, it hadn't changed a lot. I went to an oncology show, and they were serving hot dogs. And I thought, boy, that's a really bad idea. Like either you're drumming up business, or you're really mindless. And I thought, what an incredible opportunity to think of this as a medium. And that's really the way that we started to think about it. And when I went back and I showed the CEO what I had seen, he said, "What don't you see?" And I said, "I don't know. What don't I see?" And he said, "Well, you don't see anybody under 40. If you look at these shows, our demographic is aging out. We're gonna not have an audience in 25 years unless we think about new ways of engaging people." And so we started to think about what it means to invent the medium of live. Right? That in fact, what's happening now is this extraordinary new world that Phil mentioned just as he ended his presentation. This idea that, in fact, physical and digital are coming together in new ways that are making entirely new kinds of experience possible, and new ways of understanding them, planning them, creating them, and most importantly, measuring them, so that we can learn and improve. And that it is really a new medium. It's a new way of understanding the live experience. And that live experience is actually an extraordinary opportunity to put somebody inside of an idea. We can pull someone into a world and create that world around them and do something that they can't do on a screen, that we can't really do with two senses. We can't do with sound and sight. When we have the full body and the full mind experience inside of an environment, we can do things that no other medium can do. And if we think of it as a medium, we start to kind of place it in terms of other media. And we have a medium that has the greatest bandwidth in the universe, which is the bandwidth of reality. So we can actually create your entire reality. And that's really the way that we've been thinking about it. We have about 9,000 people worldwide. We produce over half of the trade shows and the major trade shows and exhibits in America. And we produce about 15,000 events a year. So we have this extraordinary perspective on the world of live experience and on the market as a whole. We produce events across every segment of the economic spectrum. So we really see the market before anyone else does. But we're not really taking advantage of that yet. And that's really the work that we're doing now. We produce CES and Comic-Con, Super Bowl halftime, and South by Southwest. We have a very, very diverse practice. And more, we're developing the capacity to really think of it as a themed entertainment experience, that it's actually a way of creating something that you can't get anywhere else. And if you think about what has changed in the last decade or so, 10 years ago, the only way to get the information was to go to the show. You had to be at the show to get access to the information. And as Phil said, that's no longer the case. Almost all the content in our shows is available somewhere online. You can get the information. You don't need to be at the show for the information. So why are you there? And the answer really is what the people in this room do. It's the capacity to invent an experience that you will never forget. Our real product is memory. Our real product is experience and memory, and making something happen that you'll never forget and that you'll want to come back to. And that's really the kind of core of what we're doing. So we're really building a practice that is designing the future of experience design. And the way that I like to think about it is as orchestration. If you think about all the other media that make up our domain, they all have systems of notation. So if you look at music, there's a system of notation. Dance, there's a way of choreographing and recording the movement. But when it comes to experience design, there's no kind of consistent way or method of orchestrating the entire thing. And that's really what we're working on now. One of the things that we've done that is really super exciting, and it really brings me to two people who are on stage with us now, is we launched the Freeman Design Council. And I did this simply because I had never done anything like the transformation that we're doing at Freeman. I've worked with a lot of companies over the years, but I'd never done this scale of transformation. And I wanted to assemble a group of people who would help us through that process and help give us guidance to help us understand how long is it really going to take, what are the kind of bumps on the road that we're inevitably going to hit, what happens when things go badly. And we assembled a pretty extraordinary team. You'll know Bruce Vaughan, who was the former CEO, co-CEO of Imagineering, and Peter, of course, who ran Imagineering Studios the creative studios for the better part of a decade. But we also had Alex McDowell, who was the creative director for Minority Report, and has developed a world-building practice, a methodology of creating worlds. And we're kind of bringing that into our practice. Sergey Gepstein, who's a perception psychologist, who really works on how people actually experience information in an environment, in a space. That information actually has a focal length, which is a really interesting concept. Rooster Schmidl he built the U.S. Cyber Command. He's probably the #1 person in the world on cybersecurity. And Andy Cunningham was the PR person that worked with Steve Jobs to launch Apple. And if you've seen the movie, there's a person who plays her in that movie. And you can see the kind of caliber of talent and people that we're bringing together because our new domain does not fit into the old categories. So we're really working on how do we develop a practice that is really a synthesis of all of these practices. So that's really the kind of direction that we're setting at Freeman. And you can see that, in fact, Haluk was one of the people who joined the Design Council, first as an outside voice, and then came on to lead our practice in strategy and data, really to integrate the capacity to record and measure live experience and develop a new kind of metric for live. And so this is, I think the opportunity, when Peter mentioned this, I thought what an extraordinary opportunity that we are looking to find colleagues and partners and collaborators in this new space to join us and ways for us to join you in what you're doing. One of the things that we realize is that we have 26 studios around the world, around America, and another dozen or so around the world. So what we really have is the world's biggest fab lab. We've got the capacity to produce practically anything almost instantaneously. The capacity that we have to execute events, because what we do when we do CES, we're building a city in a few days, and then taking that city apart and shipping it again a few days later. And so the capacity that we have to actually execute is really extraordinary, and we continue to build out that infrastructure to really understand what are the new possibilities for that synthesis of physical and digital, all around the idea of delivering a story that is an immersive experience for all the senses. So that's really what we're committed to. So I'm going to hand over now to Haluk, who will take you through sort of how we're thinking about strategy and data.
Thank you. So my background is 10 years working with experiential brands at Unilever, and then 10 years focusing on data with a huge focus on privacy and how we can actually benefit people with the data they create. And live experience is really interesting because we have experience and design sitting there, and for a long time, especially in our area, how did this event go? Great. How do we know? Well, there was lots of people here. I expect 400, maybe there's 200. Don't tell me, I don't want to be disappointed. It's that kind of behavior that we've been having. But as technology comes in, where is this line between how much data tells us there is value in creativity and where does it kill creativity? Where can we actually use it to expand what we do rather than restrict what we do? And how does it connect back to the business goals that we have, and how does it all come together? So data really sits right in the middle of all of this. And for us, it's really a boon. And the first part that it's a boon is that we are living through this mixed world of physical and digital. And although all of us in this room feel that we understand the digital because it's come about while we were alive, I would say that unless you're born after 1995, we are really all analog people. We think analog, we approach analog, we look at digital stuff, but we are not digital in ourselves. And just to kind of put that in context, that's how much data we've been creating just in the last kind of decade. And if you just kind of look at it, how much of it you see on the bottom, the scale, you see on the top how much was shared. In the blue is data that's sitting in somebody's server. In the green is data that's shareable on a cloud. And we're just coming to the point where there is enough data in the world, too much of it, but enough of it that's shareable and accessible where we can start understanding what's happening. So it's really just starting. A lot of people are talking about that big data was really born after 2015, although we've been talking about it for a decade before. What's more critical, though, is the tools that we have, because you used to have to be a genius to figure out what the data was telling you. Now we have all these smart tools that help us understand, synthesize, collect the data in relevant ways. We have AI cameras that actually help you understand what's happening as the images coming in and to be able to catalog what's in there. We have actually brain sensors that can tell you how and where ideas or receptions are being formed in the brain and how you can respond to them. You have systems that can then just look at that and start looking for correlations where you can actually generate narratives automatically from the data from insights that have been generated before. All of that dramatically reduces the amount of intelligence that you need to be able to manage all this information and makes it accessible to most of us. So the question becomes, well, that's great, but then how do we understand it? How do we put it to use? Well, the first place, and this is kind of the deep end of the water, where we start, is really to understand how do people perceive experience and how does it change our behaviors? So what happens when information hits the brain? And to the point, what information hits the brain? Do I sense something that's sitting over there? How loud does it speak to me? What part of my brain focuses on it, and how do we do? So we're working with Sergei Gepshin, for example, to map what's happening in experiences from brain to behavior. What is it that's being perceived in? How is it being correlated to what's happening on the outside? And how can we understand between the goals that people have and how they want to experience things, how they can go and understand and experience a story through space, and we can see how, as they're experiencing a narrative through space, what is it that they're experiencing, which components of it. So that in itself is a whole new world for us, that the whole world of the brain. A little bit of nerdy stuff, because I get excited by this stuff. It's fascinating that you can now measure the fact that when we're in this audience, if you're listening to me, our brain waves actually align and synthesize. So you end up creating alignment in brain waves, which means that we actually get people to think in similar manners that open you up to different experiences. The fact that we can now start measuring that, and when that happens and actually be able to tell it, is amazing, because it really takes the story and the immersive beyond what we think happened to actually seeing what's happening. But really, this whole thing is two components. One, it's shifting from the world that we live in today, which is in the world of descriptive and diagnostic. A lot of our data that comes to us is what happened, and then a little bit of it, why did it happen? And that's really the world that's of 20th century, and that's as best that analog can get us. As you become experienced, and there's a lot of experience in this room, you can start predict, but that becomes a personal thing. The biggest question for us is how can we move from predictive to orchestrated? And a lot of people believe in predictive and prescriptive. So I guess what's going to happen, and then I can tell you what's going to happen. We don't believe that you can ever prescribe human behavior. I believe that we can at best orchestrate it. And it's to the point that you got to have 3 endings to be able to manage it, and that you figure out which one you're going to plot in. So for us really is, how can we do that? And the path of that is not about data. Data is just an accelerator in that. The path of that is design. What endpoints do you want? What orchestration do you want? What kind of environment do you want to set up? And then digital is just the train that carries you there, and data is the difference between knowing where to act. So when you start thinking of data in this way, data is just not this thing that's coming and telling you how you did. Data is a big enabler. And from that perspective, really, coming back to the analog to digital thing, data is a big culture change. You know, it's not about sitting there on the radio trying to pick up the right songs and then sending the tape to your loved one. It's being able to access all this collection of interests and knowledge and things that come to you, and then how do you better decide from within that. And so part of that culture change is the nature of what we see data as. A lot of us think data as a number that tells us whether we did something, rather than something closer to a music note. And a music note is a data point. But it's designed to tell you what to do rather than what happened. It's designed to help you orchestrate with others where that fits in. And if you start thinking of data as a piece of information that's pushing you towards being able to act, then it's a very different tool that we're using. And that's part of the culture change that we're focusing on. So for example, we're focusing on decision-driven data architectures rather than source-driven data. We don't care what happened at Reg. We don't care what happened online. We don't care what happened on social. We care how that information can come together when you want to make a decision, and how which parts of that inform you best. That creates a very different approach to what you're doing. The other thing is that we care tremendously about orchestration. Right now, data comes kind of, here's the slab of what happened. You can read it on the wall and it was good or bad. But really, the way we look at it is that we have this central focus on the attendees or the fans that come, the exhibitors or the companies that want to be there, and the sponsors that want to enhance that relationship. And we really focus on that nucleus and say, well, how can we inform everybody in there about the decisions that they want to get to, and which way is the best way to do so? And what experiences then enable us to do that? And as soon as you say that, then you say, well, then how can I inform the whole team that's sitting around it to be able to see and achieve that pre, during, and post, by really being able to organize yourself to achieve. So our approach to data is really driven around this. How can we really understand what's happening at the core? How can we then spread it out to the outside so that everybody can have this music sheet that helps them say, this is going well, don't look there, go over there and check what's happening over here. And these are the 3 options that you have that might help you out. Now, as we're getting into that, that's kind of a great, but the one area that we like the most is really a critical understanding of what does return on investment mean for experience. And we really call it return on experience overall. And right now we have a big kind of business target, and we design these things around these business targets. But what we see, and again, I think it was discussed before, is that as people have this new technology that's come upon us, which is mobile and the web, that things come to us rather than us having to go to things. We care more about the things that we go to. And we have a greater need to go to those things, because to Bruce's point, we get about 1/10 of the sensorial input when we look at our digital devices, and it scrambles our brains. That's why we get angry, that's why we don't have trust, that's why we actually find it more difficult to socialize in different ways the more we spend time. So we find refuge in sensorials. We find refuge in people coming together And what we do is actually we take each component of experiences and the reason why people come, and we have 150 million people that go through our events. So we have a great amount of measurement of different interactions, actually how each component works. What's the attribution on an experience? What happens when you get fully immersed, taken over by the sound and light, and that changes the way you behave? And when you step out of it, what remains and how can we see the impact on that, on you coming back, telling somebody else, thinking something, doing something? The same thing on networking. What are the specific components of networking that move the needle? And when people come together, how can you enhance that component? And you can see across, we actually break experience down to all these bits. We create frameworks to be able to measure that, and also frameworks that help us understand where you enable, when you push, and when you actually collaborate with people to achieve these things. And it dramatically changes our ability to design better impact, to actually design better experiences, to better understand how each person wants to work across those, and really then to monetize it. Because as you get to this level, the space between breaking through and trying to hijack you into an experience and putting a logo somewhere versus understanding exactly what it is that you want from an experience and to be able to take you into that journey changes dramatically your relationship with the partners that are surrounding you. So for us, really, the data in this medium is just blowing up, and you cannot really change anything unless you quantify and visualize it and understand the world that you live in. And we are at the very beginning of our capabilities in this world. So it's a very exciting space for us. It really elevates and allows us to show the value of what we do rather than just create tribes that either agree with us or don't. But the most beautiful thing is that the more we understand, the more we can design and actually then elevate the experience and then make it available to more. So I'm going to pass it on to Annemarie, who can tell us about some of our other practices.
Thanks, Haluk. Okay, so you can imagine the increased focus for us now on the strength of collaboration and design and all of these inputs. And I just want to share some of my sort of thinking and observation about this and my experience over the past few months. So BaAM, as Christine Kerr said, has been involved with the TA for many years, and many members of our team have worked in theme parks. And we've worked on projects in parks and museums and science centers in design, production, and operation roles. And so I think we're a really good example of a creative production company whose work bridges the world of permanent installation and temporary events and entertainment. And we work a lot in temporary events and entertainment, and tremendously in the world of sport. So I wanted to give you just a little 1-minute snapshot of the projects that we've been working on recently so you can get a feel for some of the work we do, and I can explain things with context. So I would say that we work in the white spaces between traditional disciplines and functions, and we work in a way that requires an innovative structure. And I'll explain what I mean using this project example. When Lune Rouge, a company owned by Guy Laliberté, infamous of Cirque du Soleil, developed their new project, the Major Series of Putting. Their dream was to create a championship putting tournament, do it with recognizable experts in the fields of course design, architecture, and event production and operations. So they brought Jack Nicklaus Design, Populous, and BaAM together to develop the idea, to design the tournament from the ground up, and to deliver a fully operational venue. And the high-stakes putting tournament, attracting pros and amateurs from all over the world in a stadium-style presentation, was a new idea for them, and they wanted to proof this. The location ended up being right near Phil's High Roller in a staff parking lot in a partnership with Caesars. And to everybody's chagrin, the concept and the development phases happened in parallel. We had to hatch several ideas, more than one solution, because the business plan was evolving in the background. And things like decisions on capacity, tournament format, technology, all the details of the guest experience had to be flexible. The food and beverage programs had not yet been defined. They wanted a host broadcaster, their sponsorship commitments were evolving, and their business plan was evolving. And respecting the traditions of the sport and building on an authentic golf environment with the expected scale and wow of a Vegas attraction meant that a really diverse group of designers, architectural approaches had to come together. And it was my job to facilitate the process, fill all the team roles that would allow the independent experts to see their contribution in the context of the bigger sport experience. And this was indeed, for me, a white space opportunity that nobody owned, and no one discipline was more important than the other. And the test project ended up being a great success. We've come back together as a group right now, and we've been asked to turn this into a permanent installation. The NHL Winter Classic, over time, these kinds of blended, one-off, ground-up project experiences have allowed us to bring design and production resources from across the industries together, creating non-traditional events in non-traditional venues for these one-off moments. And they've been quite defining for BaAM as a company, because blending talents and calling on resources from various disciplines, and now across the whole Freeman enterprise, and disciplines that work throughout the TEA, have allowed us to really kind of spread our arms here, introducing broadcast and sport, and the sport competition aspects have broadened my understanding of how to draw these groups together and work in the space between the territories, that white space that lets us make up rules and pick the best approaches so that we can adopt them for these special projects. And for the NHL, this is, they just celebrated their 10th year in New York City this past January. I know that combining the architectural design, concert production on the scale of an Olympic ceremony, and detailed operational integration like would be required in a theme park means creating work processes that we'll share, but none of us will own. And the idea of merging these talent groups, I know everybody here is familiar with it, has been the key. And for me, getting a commitment to a blended process is what has helped us build team. And indoors or outdoors, synthesizing the approach to work under seems to create room for innovation. It doesn't seem to constrain things. Spending time on the creative and design rather than ironing out misunderstandings or misinterpretations as we pull together these diverse design groups is key. For Major League Baseball, one of the sports leagues who seem to be under the most pressure to evolve the entertainment aspect of their game while maintaining the tradition of the sport, the call for collaborative design has been a key success. And our own opportunity to revision the fans' experience at the All-Star Game allowed us to bring the worlds of experience, digital, interactive, visual, exhibit, museum, event, park design all together into one blended team. And building these teams who are able to think most broadly about how to build the big moments and how to shape the bigger moments to be more personal and takeaway has been our challenge. But what made this collaboration, or is making this collaboration possible, is the process that we've agreed to share, and most importantly, the language of design and production that we've agreed to speak, because each of our industries really has its own kind of groove and way of talking. I love working with new people. It's disarming and it's energizing all at the same time. But I need to be able to rely on a process and some rules for our collaboration. And our various industries seem to have a shorthand for communicating that can make collaboration harder sometimes. Outsider syndrome, you know, you bring in an expert or a design specialist onto the team who hasn't worked with the other people before and doesn't work in the same language, can limit contribution. And so we've made time to ask questions from each other, kind of get out of our shorthand and explain our language and develop a common language that we commit to share. And our shared commitment to design-driven production allows us to pull the pieces together because we're working to the same focus. When the NHL prepares for its draft day, they have their own creative services department internally at the league. They're the owners of the brand. They have their networks who are all responsible for their broadcast, in this case, 3 network events, televised events running separately. And then there's the in-bowl game presentation, our contribution to stage and media design, and my job to weave it together across the various groups so that the audiences, in this case, the fans in the bowl, the teams on the floor, the players who are here to be drafted for the first time, and their families in the stands, the moms and dads who are about to witness their son achieving his lifelong dream. I mean, these are our various audiences, and we need to design and commit to each of them. And when the audience experience and the focus of the creative intent is always the criteria for the design and production decisions, then our shared work quality will be very high. And you know, we're super lucky. We have so many people that we go to each year and that call us to come back to be part of these one-off events, you know, stepping out of maybe their other commitments that they have to join us in this collaboration because they love to be part of creating moments that speak to the passion of the fans, and everybody here understands that really well. I'm gonna say that I think assembling a team where everyone shares the dream, that's actually the secret sauce. Talk about secret sauce. I've pinned that one mine. And our own professional experiences become super rich, and our areas of practice are strengthened by our collaboration. These are my opinions. Peter.
I think I'm mic'd up. Thank you, Annemarie. So, thank you, Bruce, Annemarie, and Haluk. Before I share with you a little video of some of the projects that we've been working on over the last couple of years, to give you an idea of a little bit of the bandwidth of the types and scales and locations for our projects, it's become clear to me now, after spending a bit of time in this industry, that we're all in the pursuit of bringing these stories to life for our clients and their brands in very much the same way as your industry is doing in the themed entertainment industry. And it's super exciting to first have that realization in my mind to share that with you, but also to kind of look to where we can explore how we can really raise the bar on it. And as Bruce says, we're kind of inventing or reinventing this medium that has so much potential. And we see that in the faces of our clients when we deliver on that promise for them. There's excitement in their eye. There's a commitment to re-up. We have the tremendous advantage of having projects that recur either year over year or every other year and give us the opportunity to enhance it, to learn from it, to receive the data that Haluk talks about, which is becoming ever more prevalent and ever more focused to enable us to articulate and focus our interactions and make the experience so much more of a personal experience for all of our guests, all of our attendees, all of our fans, depending on which space we're in. The other exciting component of it that really kind of lights my fire is this notion of operating in every single business sector that exists in the marketplace, whether it's automotive or oil and gas or perfumes or jewelry, hospitality, you name it. All of them are spaces that are shifting, and what we're seeing in the market today, and it's consistent across these segments, is a need to adapt to the ever-changing nature of the consumers that are driving the market today. It's a very different consumers market today than it's been in the past. And experience is really an attractor for the next generation of consumer. I think the next generation of consumer is not looking for things. They're looking for experiences that they can carry with them, that they can share through their social networks, that they can that can amplify them, that's a lifestyle statement for them. And every brand that we come in touch with is searching for a way to capture that, because we can see declining attendance, as Bruce referred to in some of our shows and exhibits, and that will continue. And we need, as designers in this space, to follow where the demand will be. And so that's the exciting challenge that lies ahead for us at Freeman. I'm excited and honored to be leading the creative studio for the enterprise. We have about 600 individuals around the world, both part-time and full-time, and growing. And our markets in international are new to us. We've really only been in Asia for a few years, and that's one of our fastest growing areas. We're also in EMEA, and I was delighted to be able to put David in touch with our leaders there in the UK as a way of creating that bridge too, because I do believe that the connection between our two industries at the interface, there's something to be explored. And that really drives certainly my excitement about being in a design-driven space. So let me share with you a short video, and after that we'll take a moment to take some questions and answers. So. And just to kind of give you an idea of some of the projects that you saw there and the extent of it around the globe, I want to share this image with you, and that really concludes that portion of it. And I'd like to kind of open it up to any questions and an answer session that you might have. Happy to take any questions, or if there's any other comments that the team would like to make. Don't be shy. I will say that as I'm waiting for that question to come online, and that when I talked with David about this idea a couple of months ago, he was super excited at the notion of kind of doing a little expose on this industry, because in the UK and in Europe in particular, it seems that much of that industry is operating in the TEA space as it currently stands, and so to expand that out a little bit was of interest to him, and maybe we could talk a little bit about that, and certainly be interested in get David's further opinions on that a little later, but go ahead.
Hello, I have a question for Haluk. Speaking about data experience and return experience, can you elaborate a little bit more on how you gather and how you analyze data?
So data collection has really two areas. One, just a hygiene on the very bottom of the Maslow pyramid of just how do you pull data together in a way that's organized that you can keep on looking and get the benefit of that. We deal in a very messy ecosystem, especially in our environment, because there's so many small partners that do registration and so forth. we've actually created a platform that allows data to be collected, organized for all of our clients so that any of our clients can actually come in and do that. It's almost like a vacuum cleaner for their data that allows us to create a industry perspective. So collection of data we've automated so we don't have to deal with it, so that we can actually provide it as a service to our industry. In terms of how do we then analyze the data, the critical thing about data is the filter that you use to understand what the data is telling you. There's so much data that if you focus on the data point itself, you can tell 1,000 stories. But the question is, what are you trying to get to? So the kind of frameworks that we showed in ROX in terms of what component are we looking at, within that, what are the things that we believe are going to move our audience and deliver the kind of behavior and thought change that we're looking for, and to work with our clients to be able to establish what that means for them. So for a medical association, what return on networking means very different than for Comic-Con than it does for a sports event. So how do you kind of identify those elements? And then what we do then is that we just help collect the data to inform those pieces, whether we deliver them or how to make them better. So that's why it's a design process for us, is what outcomes are you trying to do, what filters can you put in, and then how do you associate the data to that. The data itself, the major thing is make sure that you got clean data so you can look back at it, but you don't want to spend effort on that. You just want to automate that as much as possible so you can focus on the frameworks and understanding how you can action that better. I hope that explained it in a minute.
For me, the notion of personalizing that data and creating an interactive experience that really kind of raises the bar for you in your space is really compelling. And I know in my previous place of employment, a lot of energy was put into knowing as much as you could about the guests that would be attending the attractions or parks, and to be able to kind of respond accordingly and to have your experiences as you design them react to you, whether it's your birthday or whether it's a special occasion or whatever that may be. And that really helps us kind of distinguish ourselves and really elevate the overall human experience in that case. Anybody else? Yeah.
It kind of moves the other way around. It's first we understand what we're trying to design, and we help create with the client, working with them. What do they mean by return on learning, content, sponsorship? So we help them first establish those frameworks, because those frameworks help almost work like an equalizer in figuring out which component, as they establish a narrative over space and time, they want to push stronger. And right now they don't think that way. They think, I need content, I need networking, I need experience, volume 10 on all of them, and somebody will hear one or the other. But that's why it's so difficult to kind of get clarity when you step into those environments. So what we help the client really do is say, well, what are you trying to achieve, and what level do you need what at to be able to achieve that? Then we can step away, and the client and creative and design can talk about, well, actually, how do you achieve those goals? So that's why it's a design practice in which we figure out their endpoint, then we help them figure out how to measure that, then we can step away from that. I hope that that's helpful.
You started this discussion on growing your audience and base and people who are coming to you in the new generations. With the barriers to access, how are you taking that up in your holistic design rather than at client request?
Sorry, I didn't quite understand that.
How do you address the issues of barrier to access in event design from a design view instead of a client request to bring better generations and more people into the events?
Well, I think that it really goes to the heart of relevance. If you think about what we're doing every day, we're bringing new things to market. We're really producing massive change. And that interaction, that connection between innovators and the potential impact is the real purpose of our work. Carrie Freeman, who's the vice chair of the company, who's really our leader in terms of a kind of ethic and vision for the company, Carrie talks about the difference between a bricklayer who's, stonemason who's cutting stones, and if you ask them what they're doing, they say, I'm cutting stones. And the person next to them says, who's also a stonemason, says, I'm building a cathedral. Right? And that they're both doing the same work, but one sees the vision and is driven by purpose, and the other it's a task and a job. And so for us, it's really understanding what's the real purpose and relevance of what we do. We work with hundreds of the biggest organizations in the world, doing, really taking on some of the greatest challenges in human history. We work with the diabetes organization, the heart people, the cancer people. I mean, all of these organizations are really trying to inspire people to get to a new place. And it turns out that the number one reason people go to our events is inspiration. So if we say, look, our purpose is real, our goal is inspiration, and our metric is young people, we're doing everything that we can to develop new ways of engagement for people of all ages, but especially young people, to want to be part of this, to really want to be part of taking on these big challenges in their fields and doing that kind of work. So for instance, we're working with the IFT, the International Food Technologists. And if you think about IFT, is basically everything that goes in, every ingredient that goes into food. Right, that's their industry. But they're now doing a project on how to feed 10 billion people. Right? So, because the ingredients are their kind of, like that's the material that that their market is all about. But the purpose of their market is to feed 10 billion people sustainably. And so part of it is saying, look, we want to work with you to articulate and define that vision, and then design the experience to inspire people to do it, to inspire people who want to be there. And as Peter and Haluk mentioned, we have the unique opportunity that we've worked with these organizations, in many cases for 40 or 50 years. I mean, we've been working with IFT for decades. So it's an extraordinary responsibility and opportunity if we can frame it in the right way and really take advantage of the commitment that they have to us and the corresponding commitment that we have to them and their success. Because if their audience, I mean, when Bob said, look, why don't we see young people in our shows? If their audience declines, our business declines. So it's very much in our interest to help them succeed and to find the new generation who are inspired to be part of this industry and be part of this experience. And that's really what we're focused on. So we're doing it both ways. We're driving it into our practice, to develop the practice of doing that. But we're also being asked for this by our clients, because they can see the numbers. They can see where a lot of organizations are challenged in this way because they've been doing it the way they've been doing it since the 70s. And they're finally feeling the force of pressure to evolve and change.
Can I add something to it,
Sure.
if I may? We keep on thinking of live experience as something that's been around for millennia, the bazaar and everything, and as a necessity that people have to come to. I mean, you were saying it. People had to come there because the information was not available anywhere else. So why should they come now? Again, it turns out people really are looking for immersive experiences as we have less and less of them, and there's a yearning. And it turns out that if you can design that immersive experience in a way that delivers that connection for them, they will take you more into account than any amount of spam, emailing, Twittering, social engagement that you can drive their way. Which means that when people connect to real experiences or real people, the return on marketing goes up to about 2.5 percentage points rather than 0.05 on a typical marketing engagement. And so what we're seeing that in an omni-channel world where you're trying to reach people everywhere, an experience anchors it and is not the final part, it's actually the beginning of the marketing channel. So just kind of flipping that thinking around and saying, well, how can we get them there is different than really saying, well, how can we design it so that whoever comes there brings more people in? That's really also a part of the way we're approaching it, because this is a new medium. It's not the live experience of 20 years ago where you have no idea what's happening. Now you can actually organize it in a way that you can quantify, figure out the attribution, and we are seeing, rather than just talking about it, that they are having real impact, that they're having ROI impact on marketing spend. That's why most technology companies are spending more on live experiences than they're doing on digital technology, because they're finding that they cannot otherwise connect and get their fan bases going.
This has been interesting watching this presentation. My name is Laura Morakowitz. I started my career in Orlando, so I'm familiar with what was Freeman Decorating in the early 90s, where they excelled at exhibition and decorating. With Freeman, as a Disney technician, we did some exceptional themed shows for corporate clients. And we had the benefit of the properties at that time of The Lion King and Aladdin, Beauty and the Beast, which just lent to themed experiences that were right down to the napkins, the food chosen, ceiling treatments, et cetera, when you've got those kind of budgets. So from that inspiration, if you will, I moved in to other things, and corporate events specifically. We used to, in the late 90s, do a lot of theatrically based performances in the US. The corporate client was happy to spend millions of dollars for you to be more creative on the entrance of the CEO. September 11th happened. And at that point, people didn't want to travel. There was a huge spike in video conferencing, okay? After about 4 to 6 months of that, whatever event companies were still standing, most of which had gone out of business, including the one I was in, we discovered that we needed that interaction, the physical interaction. But they didn't want to spend the money. So it became a mantra of do what your company does. And the events companies diminished. And in the US particularly, we are known globally. I've been living in the UK now for 13 years because I became disillusioned by how the US approaches events. We are known globally as the pipe and drape hotel riser production company, okay? Now, everything you've shown me on the screen, I've also done sports marketing. I did all the first three tailgate parties for the NFL, for their London game, and I've evolved that way. I just wanted to answer, really kind of give I really applaud Freeman in taking this. You guys have been evolving in different sectors for years. Freeman XP decided to take on the brand components. That's going to be probably your most challenging client because you're going to have to get them to spend the money. ROI for us with these corporate events was always their biggest challenge because the client didn't know what they wanted to know. And that's the hardest meeting to have with them. We need to see what we're spending because next year we're going to need a bigger budget, blah, blah, blah. Okay. You know, the only event I ever did that I could show a tangible ROI was because the reason for the meeting was for people to either resign or get off their butt. Okay, and we were 90% successful with that. Okay, and that was the only one.
A lot of people resigned.
It was fascinating. And we did employ an amount of...
That's the opposite of inspiration.
Well, it was pretty inspiring to some. But the interesting thing with that was we had to employ some theatricality and some drama. And we had to get the executives brought in, and we brought in a whole team to say the things the executives didn't want to say. But so that creativity's there. The issue with the storytelling, spectacle's brilliant, the sports marketing thing, that's inspiring to be in a group of tens of thousands of people and to all be there for the same reason. That's the inspiring thing. I really applaud where you are. You're going to find it challenging. especially because you're all coming from the entertainment, permanent installation kind of perspective, and that usually has a good solid story to start with, whether it's the IP or what have you. A lot of the corporates can have a history. Working for Coca-Cola, that's brilliant because there's so much to work with. But we're going into this new era of digital and how we capture information in marketing. But let's not lose sight of the importance of the intimacy of the one-on-one relationships.
Thank you.
So
Great.
thank you very much. for
Thank you,
involving-
Laura. That
Yeah,
was
and
a good end.
Thank you, yeah. I just think that you hit on a lot of great areas for opportunity, and it is changing. It did go through, a cycle driven by a lot of world events, and we're sensing that kind of enthusiasm and excitement for that change. And it's a million stories waiting to be told in the way that we are all skilled and crafted at doing it. And it doesn't seem to have an end, which is really great, but what it does need is amazing talent that thinks that way, and that's part of our quest, so
Great.
we're on
Well,
together.
thank you very much to all of you. I think I hope it was eye-opening for people, and I think there's a lot of opportunity here, and look forward to continuing the conversation, most definitely.
Thank you so much for having us. It was great to be here. Thank you.
Thank you.